Every time a Hindu household begins something new, a business, a journey, a wedding, a meal, a prayer, the first name spoken is his. Before Vishnu, before Brahma, before Shiva himself, his own father. The round-bellied, elephant-headed, mouse-riding god with the broken tusk and the ball of sweets is the one the universe asks to go first, always and without exception. He is called Vignaharta, the remover of obstacles, and Pratham Pujya, the first among those worthy of worship. His image stands at the entrance of every temple, every home, every beginning. He is, by any measure, the most beloved and most universally worshipped deity in the entire Hindu tradition. And almost no one knows the full truth of how he came to have that face. Not the sanitized version that reduces the story to a simple misunderstanding and a convenient elephant. The full truth, the one that involves a mother's loneliness, a son's extraordinary courage, a father's catastrophic anger, a death that should have been permanent, and a restoration so complete that it turned tragedy into the foundation of the greatest blessing in all of creation. That story is what we are here to tell today. And by the time it is finished, you will understand why Ganesha is worshipped first, not simply because the gods decided to honor him, but because he earned that place in a way that no other being in the Puranic tradition ever has. I am your host, Guru Acharya, and I welcome you all to this exciting new episode of the channel, The Eternal Odyssey, where we explore the stories of myths and fantasies. Chapter 1: The Goddess and the Longing That Created a God. To understand why Parvati created Ganesha, you must understand what her life on Mount Kailash was actually like. This is where the popular imagination tends to go soft. It pictures the divine couple in a kind of eternal domestic bliss, the ash-smeared ascetic god and the radiant mountain goddess in perfect, undisturbed harmony. The reality the texts preserve is considerably more complex and considerably more human. Shiva was Shiva. He was the lord of dissolution and the master of contradiction, the god who could meditate without moving for 10,000 years, and then rise without warning to dance the Tandav, the great cosmic dance that shook the foundations of the three worlds. He kept company that a mountain goddess of Parvati's background found deeply challenging. The Ganas, his attendants, were wild and unpredictable beings, ecstatic and lawless, who operated according to their lord's aesthetic rather than the more ordered conventions of the divine courts, where Parvati had grown up. They roamed Kailash freely. They entered wherever they wished. And Parvati, whose nature was sovereign and whose dignity was absolute, found herself in a situation that the Shiva Purana describes with quite precision. She had no one who was entirely and unconditionally her own. The Ganas served Shiva. The rishis and divine visitors who came to Kailash came for Shiva. Nandi, the great bull who stood at the gate, was Shiva's devotee. Everything and everyone on that mountain oriented toward her husband, as was their right and their nature. But Parvati wanted a guardian who was hers, not a servant, not a devotee borrowed from her husband's retinue, but someone whose first loyalty was to her, someone she had made, someone who would stand at her door because she had placed him there. The desire was not small or incidental. In the theology of the Shakti tradition, it was the desire of the divine feminine for a creation that was fully her own, the creative impulse in its most primal and personal expression. And so, on a morning on Mount Kailash when Shiva was away, and the mountain was quiet, and the snow was bright on the peaks above, Parvati went to her bathing chamber with turmeric paste on her hands, and the intention to make something new. Chapter 2: Born from the goddess's own hands. The Shiva Purana's account of Ganesha's creation is one of the most beautiful passages in all of Puranic literature because it operates simultaneously on the level of the deeply ordinary and the profoundly cosmic. Parvati was preparing for her bath. She took the turmeric paste and the sandalwood and the sacred clay that she used to anoint her body, and she worked them together in her hands. The texts describe her doing this with a focus that is both creative and maternal, the focus of someone who is not merely cleaning the paste from her skin, but shaping it, intentionally, deliberately, into something that has form. She worked the material until it was a figure, a boy, a child, as perfect in every feature as the imagination of a goddess could make him. She set him before her, and she breathed life into him. The precise mechanism of this varies across the texts. The Shiva Purana says she breathed her own divine energy into the form. The Brahma Vaivarta Purana describes her charging him with the power of her Shakti. But every account converges on the result: the figure moved. He opened his eyes. He looked up at the face looking down at him, and saw what every child sees in the first face they encounter: the entire world, entire, complete, and absolutely his. She looked at him and told him who he was. She said, "You are my son. You are mine, born from my own body, from my own hands, from my own intention. There is no being on this mountain, or in these three worlds, whose claim on you comes before mine." She gave him a stick, the texts say a bamboo staff, and she placed him at the entrance to her bathing chamber. She told him to let no one enter. No one. Regardless of who they claim to be, regardless of their power or their rank or their relationship to her. No one was to cross that threshold until she gave permission. The boy, who had been alive for perhaps the length of one breath, looked at his mother, looked at the door, and took up his position. He did not ask what would happen if someone powerful came. He did not ask whether there were exceptions to the rule. He stood at the door with his staff and his brand new existence and his total, unconditional loyalty to the one who had made him, and he waited to do his job. Chapter 3: The Return of the Lord of Kailash. Shiva returned to Kailash in the ordinary way of someone coming home, which is to say, without announcement and without any particular awareness that the landscape of his household had changed in his absence. He had been away in meditation or wandering or whatever the specific account places him doing, and he was returning to his mountain, to his consort, to the familiar rhythms of Kailash. He approached Parvati's chambers. He was the lord of this mountain. He was the husband of the woman inside. He was the destroyer of worlds and the father of creation's dissolution, a being before whom the greatest gods stepped aside as a matter of course. The concept that there was anyone in the three worlds with the standing to prevent him from going where he wished on his own mountain had genuinely not entered his awareness. And then there was a boy in the doorway. A child he had never seen, holding a staff, looking at him with the absolute, earnest, uncomplicated directness of someone who has been given a job and intends to do it. Shiva stopped. He looked at the boy. The Shiva Purana records the exact exchange that followed with a conciseness that makes each word heavy with what comes next. Shiva identified himself, not arrogantly, because Shiva does not perform arrogance, but simply factually. He was Parvati's husband. He was the lord of Kailash. He was going in. The boy said no. He said it without rudeness, without challenge, without the slightest excess of aggression. He said it the way someone says no, when they have been given a clear instruction, and intend to honor it regardless of the circumstances, simply, directly, and with total conviction. No one enters. Those were his instructions. Shiva looked at this boy, who had appeared from nowhere on his mountain, and was blocking his path to his own wife's chambers, and he felt something that the texts are careful to name correctly. He did not feel confusion. He felt anger, the particular, sudden, white-hot anger of someone whose authority has been refused by someone who should have no authority to refuse it. Chapter 4: The Fight at the Doorway. What followed was, by any celestial military assessment, not a fair contest. On one side, a newly created child, hours old, made of turmeric paste and clay, and a mother's divine energy, armed with a bamboo staff. On the other side, the Lord of KAILASH, the destroyer of the triple cities of the Asuras, the god whose third eye had once reduced Kamdeva to ash with a single glance, surrounded by his Ganas, those wild, ecstatic, terrifying attendants who served him with the devotion of beings who have given themselves completely to something beyond ordinary comprehension. The Ganas came first. This is recorded consistently across the accounts. Shiva sent his attendants to deal with the situation rather than engaging directly, because the appropriate response to an unknown child blocking a doorway is not for the destroyer of worlds to intervene personally. The Ganas, who had faced armies and demons and the weapons of heaven without flinching, went to remove the boy from the door. And they found, to their considerable surprise, that they could not do it. The Shiva Purana's account of this portion of the story has a quality that is almost comedic in its repetition, that says, group after group of Ganas sent to clear the doorway, group after group retreating in disarray, baffled and bruised, unable to move a child who should have been effortlessly removable. Because Parvati had not made an ordinary child. She had made a child from her own divine Shakti, and that child was, in his own way, as absolute in his nature as his father. He fought the Ganas with his staff, and with whatever the texts variously describe as his natural supernatural capability, and he held the doorway with the focused, total commitment of someone who has been given exactly one thing to do and has decided, with every fiber of his being, to do it. When the Ganas failed and retreated and reported back that the boy could not be moved, Shiva understood that the situation required his personal attention. He raised his Trishula, the great trident that is the symbol and weapon of his absolute authority over creation, preservation, and dissolution, and the confrontation at the doorway became something else entirely. Chapter 5: The Silence That Followed. The decapitation of Ganesha is the pivot on which the entire story turns, and the texts treat it with a gravity proportional to its enormity. Shiva's Trishula fell. The boy who had been made that morning from his mother's hands, who had opened his eyes to find himself already charged with purpose, who had spent the entire length of his brief existence standing at a door doing exactly what he had been asked to do, that boy fell. The doorway he had been guarding was cleared. Shiva entered. And inside, Parvati was finishing her bath, unaware that the silence outside was the silence of something irreversible. The versions of what happened next vary across the different Puranic accounts, but they converge on the emotional reality with complete consistency. Parvati emerged from her chamber. She saw what lay at the threshold. The Brahmanda Purana and the Shiva Purana both record her response as something that goes beyond grief into something that shook the foundations of the mountain itself, the grief of a mother, yes, but also the grief of a creator watching her creation destroyed, the grief of a sovereign whose authority over her own household had been violated in the most absolute and permanent way possible. She understood immediately what had happened. She understood that her husband had come home and found a boy he did not recognize blocking his path, and that the encounter had ended the way encounters between Shiva's anger and obstacles to his will typically end. She looked at what was left of the child she had made that morning, and the fire that was Parvati's nature in its full expression, the fire that is Shakti in her ungentled form, rose in her with a force that made the three worlds tremble. She turned to Shiva. The conversation that followed is one of the most remarkable in all of the Shiva Purana, not a battle, not a curse, but a reckoning between two absolute powers who are also, inescapably, bound to each other. She told him what he had destroyed. She told him whose child that had been. And she told him, with the absolute clarity of a being who would not be moved from this position by any argument or any authority, that the child would live again, whole and honored, or the world would witness what the withdrawal of Shakti from creation actually looked like. She was not making a threat. She was making a statement of natural law. Without her, nothing existed. And she would not sustain a world that had destroyed her son. Chapter 6: Brahma's Council and the Search in the North. Shiva understood. This is the detail the texts are careful to preserve. He did not respond to Parvati's grief with defensiveness or with the pride of someone who believes their actions require no accounting. He understood what he had done. He had destroyed the child of the woman he loved, the creation of her own hands and her own power, a child who had been doing nothing more than the job he had been given, with extraordinary faithfulness and courage. The understanding was not comfortable. And so Shiva, who is the god of both destruction and restoration, whose nature contains both the ending and the possibility of what comes after the ending, turned to Brahma for counsel on how to make this right. The solution Brahma offered was as specific as it was strange. Send the divine attendants north, he said, and find the first living creature they encounter facing north, and bring its head. The direction is not arbitrary. North, in the Vedic cosmological tradition, is the direction of Kuber, the lord of wealth and prosperity, the direction associated with wisdom, with the pole star that does not move, with the orientation of meditation, and the inward turning consciousness of the deepest contemplation. The first creature found facing north would carry in its body the qualities of that direction: steadiness, wisdom, memory, the kind of expansive, patient intelligence that can hold many things at once and find the path through complexity. The search parties went. The Shiva Purana records the instruction with a specificity that has always been taken seriously by the tradition: the first creature facing north. What they found was an elephant. Specifically, a great elephant, alone in the forest, its magnificent head turned toward the northern sky, in the posture that the text is careful to describe. There are accounts in regional traditions that add detail to this elephant, that it was the vehicle of Indra, or that it was a noble beast of particular sacredness, but the essential fact across every version is the same: it was the first, it was facing north, and its head was brought back to Kailash. Shiva received it. He held it in his hands, this vast, grey, wise, wrinkled head with its curved tusks and its broad forehead and its eyes that even in death carried something that looked like knowledge, and he carried it to where his son lay. Chapter 7: The Restoration and the First Blessing. Shiva placed the elephant's head on his son's shoulders and breathed into him the full force of his own divine Shakti, the Shakti of the Not just life but divine life, not just restoration but elevation, not just the reversal of what had been done, but the transformation of the entire event into something that pointed forward rather than merely correcting what lay behind. The Shiva Purana describes the restoration with a beauty that is worth sitting with. The boy who had been made of turmeric and clay and a mother's creative power became, in this second birth, something entirely unprecedented. He was still Parvati's son, her creation, her loyalty, the child of her hands and her intention. But he was now also Shiva's son, acknowledged, blessed, touched by the destructive and creative power of the Lord of KAILASH in the most intimate and irreversible way. The elephant head was not a replacement or a compromise. It was an addition. The child who had been willing to stand at a door and face the entire force of his father's wrath, who had held his position with a courage that had impressed every being who witnessed it, including the one who had ultimately defeated him, was now wearing the head of the most intelligent land animal in creation, a creature associated in the Vedic tradition with memory, with accumulated wisdom, with the capacity to hold knowledge across vast stretches of time, with the ability to find paths through dense and difficult terrain that no smaller being could navigate. The large ears that could hear what others missed. The trunk that could handle the delicate and the enormous with equal precision. The great forehead that, in the iconographic tradition of India, has always been the seat of the highest consciousness. All of this became part of the being who opened his eyes for the second time and found both his parents looking at him. Parvati took her son in her arms. The texts describe this reunion with a restraint that makes it more powerful rather than less. There are no elaborate descriptions of celestial flowers falling or divine music playing. There is just a mother holding her child, made whole again by a love that had refused to accept any other outcome. Chapter 8. Why he is worshipped first. The granting of Ganesha's primacy, his elevation to the position of Pratham Pujya, the first among those worthy of worship, was not an afterthought or a consolation prize. It was a recognition, arrived at by the assembled gods, of what had actually been demonstrated at the doorway on KAILASH. Shiva declared it, and the other gods confirmed it, and the principle has held across every tradition and every millennium since. Before any undertaking, large or small, sacred or ordinary, Ganesha is invoked first. The reasons the texts offer for this primacy are multiple and theologically layered, but the one that the story itself most directly supports is the one rooted in what Ganesha proved at that door. He was asked to do one thing, and he did it without compromise, without exception, without calculation about what the consequences might be for himself. He did not step aside when the most powerful being in the three worlds told him to. He did not negotiate or find a middle path that would have been reasonable and understandable and entirely false to the charge he had been given. He stood. He stood against Shiva himself, not from defiance or pride or any agenda of his own, but from the pure, complete, unconditional loyalty to the one who had placed him there. This is the quality that the tradition has always honored above every other, not power, not intelligence, not beauty or wealth or spiritual attainment, but the faithfulness that does not calculate its own cost. And then consider what happened after. He was killed. His head was taken. He was restored with a face that was different from the one he had been made with. And when he opened his eyes the second time, he did not carry resentment. He did not require explanation or apology before accepting the new form his father had given him. He simply continued being Parvati's son, continued being Shiva's son, continued being the being he was, in the new form he had been given, from the place where death and restoration had deposited him. This is the complete truth of how Ganesha got his elephant head. It was not an accident. It was not merely the result of a mistake and a convenient solution. It was the visible record of a series of choices: Parvati's choice to create, Ganesha's choice to stand firm, Parvati's choice to refuse any world that did not include her son, Shiva's choice to restore rather than merely regret, that together produced the being who stands at every beginning as the reminder that the qualities most worth worshipping are not the ones that avoid difficulty, but the ones that walk through it completely, without losing their essential nature on the other side. Chapter 9. The remover of obstacles was once an obstacle himself. There is one final layer to this story that the tradition preserves, and that most retellings overlook, and it is the layer that transforms the entire narrative from a beautiful mythology into a complete philosophical teaching. Ganesha, the remover of obstacles, the god invoked at every beginning precisely so that the path will be clear, was himself the obstacle. He stood in a doorway and refused to let the most powerful being in the universe pass. He was, by definition, an obstacle, the thing in the way, the resistance, the force that prevented movement from one place to another. And he was utterly, completely right to be. Because not everything that presents itself as an obstacle is an obstacle in the negative sense. Some things that block a path are blocking it, because the path should not be taken in that direction at that moment. Some refusals are not resistances to be overcome, but wisdom to be recognized. Ganesha stood at the door of his mother's privacy and said, "This is not the right path, right now." And he said it to someone who had every right and every power to go anywhere he wished, and he said it anyway, because the rightness of a boundary does not depend on whether the person encountering it has the power to breach it. This is why he is the remover of obstacles. Not because he clears every path indiscriminately, but because he knows, from the most direct personal experience possible, what an obstacle actually is. He knows the difference between the obstacle that should be removed and the obstacle that should be honored. He knows what it costs to stand at a door when the one trying to enter is more powerful than you. He knows what it means to hold a position, not from strength but from conviction. And he knows, because he lived it, that the destruction of an obstacle is not always the end of its story. Sometimes what appears to be the removal of an obstacle is the beginning of its transformation into something that will guard every doorway in the universe for the rest of time. That is Ganesha. That is the complete truth. And every time you bow to him before beginning something new, you are not just asking for your path to be cleared. You are invoking the wisdom of the one who once stood in a doorway and refused to move, and who became, because of exactly that refusal, the first name in every prayer that has ever been spoken since. He was made of turmeric and clay. He stood at a door against the Lord of the universe. He lost his head. He was restored. And then, without bitterness, without hesitation, he became the first name in every prayer ever spoken. That arc, from a handful of paste in a goddess's hands to the most beloved deity in the world, is the arc this story was always drawing. And if it moved you the way it was meant to move you, do not let the moment pass without honoring it. Hit that like button right now, not because we are asking, but because this story deserves to be heard by every person who has ever stood at a difficult door and refused to move, and every person who needs to know that stories this extraordinary exist and are waiting for them. Share this with someone who loves Ganesha, someone who grew up hearing his name before every beginning, or someone who is hearing his complete story for the very first time. And subscribe, because this channel is built on exactly this, the commitment to take the stories the ancient world gave us and tell them fully, honestly, with all the depth and all the humanity they contain. We will not sanitize them. We will not simplify them. We will tell them the way they were always meant to be told. Every week, one story at a time. Jai Ganesh. See you until next time. Thank you.